The train arrived in the dusty frontier town just before sunset. Its iron wheels screaming against the rails as if the machine itself was tired of dragging people across a harsh and unforgiving land. The platform was crowded with men in worn hats and dust-covered boots, each of them pretending not to look too eager while secretly hoping the woman stepping off that train might become the answer to their lonely lives. In the Wild West, mail-order brides were not uncommon. Women traveled across states chasing promises written in ink, promises of homes, families, and protection. But sometimes the promises waiting at the station were colder than the wind that blew through the empty plains. That evening, when the passenger door opened, 3 women stepped down onto the wooden platform. 2 were immediately greeted by smiling men who rushed forward with flowers, awkward bows, and hopeful laughter. Their letters had found their matches. Their futures were already being claimed. But the third woman stood alone. Her name was Clara Bennett, and she held a small, worn suitcase so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She waited patiently, scanning every face in the crowd. Each passing moment felt heavier than the last. The men who had written to her, Thomas Hale, had promised he would be there. Yet the crowd slowly thinned. And Thomas Hale never came. At first, the townspeople watched with quiet curiosity. Then the whispers began. Looks like someone got stood up. Probably lied in those letters. She's just another drifter. The word stung worse than the cold air. Clara tried to keep her head high, but the humiliation burned deep inside her chest. She had traveled for days with nothing but hope guiding her. Every mile of the journey had been filled with dreams of a small house. Maybe a garden, maybe even laughter around a dinner table. But now, standing alone on that wooden platform, she realized those dreams might have been nothing more than ink on paper. The station master eventually cleared his throat and approached her. Miss, if nobody's coming for you, you'll need to move along. Clara nodded slowly. She stepped off the platform and onto the dusty street of a town that clearly had no place for her. That's when the trouble began. A group of rough cowboys sitting outside the saloon noticed her immediately. They had the look of men who had spent too many nights drinking and too many days causing trouble. One of them tipped his hat back and laughed. Well now. Look what the train dragged in. Another man spat tobacco onto the ground. Mail-order bride nobody wanted. The group erupted into cruel laughter. Clara tried to walk past them quickly, her eyes focused on the road ahead. But one of the men stepped into her path. Where you going, sweetheart? Ain't got no husband, no house, and no place to sleep tonight. Her heart pounded with fear. She clutched her suitcase and whispered, please. Let me pass. The cowboy leaned closer, the smell of whiskey heavy on his breath. Why should we? The men around him laughed again. And then a quiet voice spoke from the other side of the street. That's enough. The laughter stopped instantly. Boots scraped against wood as the cowboys turned to look. Standing near the hitching post was a tall man dressed in a long brown coat and a weathered hat pulled low over his eyes. His horse stood calmly beside him, as if it already knew trouble was coming. The stranger stepped forward slowly. Every movement was calm, controlled, dangerous. Move away from the lady, he said. The leader of the group smirked. And who's gonna make us? The cowboy lifted his head slightly, revealing sharp eyes that had seen more than most men in that town ever would. My name's Daniel Carter, he replied. A few people watching from nearby buildings exchanged nervous glances. Daniel Carter was not a man known for speaking twice. The leader of the troublemakers chuckled. You defending her? She ain't even yours. Daniel's voice stayed calm. She's a woman traveling alone. That's reason enough. The cowboy stepped forward, clearly thinking Daniel was bluffing. Big mistake. Daniel moved faster than anyone expected. In a blur of motion, the troublemaker was suddenly flat on the dirt road, coughing and stunned. Daniel hadn't even raised his voice. The rest of the group immediately backed away. Nobody in that town wanted trouble with Daniel Carter. Silence spread across the street. Daniel then turned toward Clara. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Her eyes were filled with fear, exhaustion, and disbelief that someone had actually stepped in to help her. Daniel tipped his hat politely. Ma'am, looks like this town hasn't shown you much kindness. Clara swallowed hard before answering. No, it hasn't. Daniel studied her carefully. He could see the long journey written in the dust on her dress and the sadness in her eyes. Then he said something that shocked everyone watching. You can stay at my ranch until you figure things out. Gasps rippled through the small crowd. Clara blinked in surprise. You don't even know me. Daniel gave her a faint smile. Sometimes that's the best way to start. And with that simple moment, everything began to change. But what neither of them realized was that Clara Bennett wasn't just another abandoned bride. She was running from a past that was far more dangerous than anyone in that town could imagine. And soon, that past would come looking for her. The ride to Daniel Carter's ranch took nearly an hour. And during the entire journey, Clara barely spoke. The horse moved steadily across the open plains while the sun slowly dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and purple. Daniel didn't rush her. He had learned long ago that people carrying pain often needed silence more than questions. Still, something about Clara Bennett didn't match the rumors the town had already started whispering about her. She didn't look like a drifter. She looked like someone running from something. When they finally reached the ranch, Clara stared in quiet amazement. The property was modest but strong, wide wooden fences, a sturdy barn, and a house that had clearly been built with patience and hard work. "This is yours?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "Built most of it myself." For the first time since arriving in town, Clara allowed herself a small smile. Inside the house, Daniel prepared a simple meal while Clara sat at the table, still clutching her suitcase as if it were the only thing grounding her to reality. Eventually Daniel sat down across from her. "You don't have to tell me anything tonight," he said. "But sooner or later, the truth tends to catch up with people." Clara looked down at her hands. For a long moment, the room remained silent. Then she whispered something that made Daniel's expression grow serious. "The men who wrote those letters. Thomas Hale." Daniel nodded. "I know the name." Clara's voice trembled. "He's dead." The words hung heavy in the air. Daniel leaned back slightly. "Dead how?" Clara swallowed hard. "He was murdered." Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Daniel studied her face carefully. "Why do I get the feeling," he said quietly, "that his death has something to do with you being here?" Tears filled Clara's eyes. "Because it does." She took a shaky breath and began telling the truth she had carried across half the country. Thomas Hale had written to her for nearly a year. His letters were kind, thoughtful, and full of dreams about building a life together in the West. But shortly before Clara left for the journey, something changed. His final letter had been rushed. Fearful. He wrote that powerful men in the territory wanted something he had discovered. Something valuable enough to kill for. He begged Clara to come quickly. But when she arrived, he was already gone. Daniel listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked one simple question. "Did he leave you anything?" Clara slowly opened her suitcase. Hidden beneath her clothes was a small leather journal. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "That's what they're looking for." Clara nodded. "They killed him for it." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Well then. Looks like this ranch just became the most dangerous place in the territory." Clara's face filled with guilt. "I never meant to bring trouble to your door." Daniel stood and walked toward the window, staring out into the dark plains. After a moment he spoke. "Trouble has a way of finding people whether they want it or not." He turned back toward her. "But you're not facing it alone anymore." Clara looked up in surprise. "Why would you help me?" Daniel placed his hat on the table and answered with quiet certainty. "Because the world already decided you didn't matter." He paused. "And I don't agree with the world." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. And somewhere far away, men were already riding toward the Carter Ranch. Men who believed the journal. "Hello, dear friends. Today, let's make a chocolate cake. First, prepare flour, cocoa powder, baking powder, salt, eggs, butter, and other ingredients. Mix them together and knead them into a fine dough. Next, let the dough rise until it becomes fluffy and soft. Then, scoop the cake batter into a baking pan and add the pre-made stuff. Finally, when the sweet cake comes out of the oven, exuding its tempting aroma, everyone gathers around to enjoy it together. The joy in their hearts is hard to express in words. Come and try making your own chocolate cake.